Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Micah. Today I want to talk to you about limited edition eyeshadow palettes because I think that limited edition eyeshadow palettes is actually a thing I don't very often go for. If I look at my entire collection, then most of what I have are permanent palettes. I'm not someone who's like, ooh, this is limited edition, I have to get that. So there are definitely limited edition items that over the years I decided to just not get. And that's what I want to chat to you about today. So limited edition eyeshadow palettes that I decided to pass up on, and just sort of like sharing that with you and talking about eyeshadow palettes again, because that's my jam. So a palette that was very much hyped a few years ago, I think it was around the time that Decay also released a Naked Heat, or at least in my brain these things were released around the same time, and that was the Decay Beach palette, which had like a bunch of warm tones with a pop of blue, and there were a lot of people who were raving about that palette, saying it was really great quality and how amazing it was, but I was like, I already own Naked Heat. Why would I buy this palette? Why am I really only going to buy this palette that has essentially the same shades as the Naked Heat because it has a pop of blue? I didn't really get it. So that's why I very much passed up on the Decay Beach palette. I was like, I don't care how good the quality is. I mean, I don't have the other one on here, but I'm now actually, as I'm talking, thinking of another Decay palette where I felt that way. A lot of people were raving about that Kristin, Leanne, like weird Kaleidoscope kind of palette with the weird layout, that one. Everybody was raving about it, and I looked at it in store so many times, and I was like, yeah, it's got gorgeous shades, but that layout, I just can't deal with that layout. That layout was just completely throwing me off, and I knew I just wouldn't be using that kind of palette with that kind of layout. So that's why I also decided to pass up on that. I also have some Kat Von D on here. So Kat Von D, back when she was still like everybody's darling, she did the Metal Matte palette, and the Metal Matte palette was a very long rectangular palette with really cool design features on it, where no matter how you sort of like, if you turned the palette around, it would say metal and it would say matte. It's like a certain like design technique, which I thought was really, really cool. And I almost bought this. I almost, at the time, Sephora US shipped to the Netherlands, so I could have gotten this. And at the time I decided I was not gonna get it. And the reason why I ended up not doing it is, as I saw people using it, I just felt it didn't really give very versatile looks. And that's because it really had a few really nice pops of color. It had a really nice green, I believe, and a really nice blue. But everything was so bland and neutral. And I think that at the time, or around that time, she also had already released that like matte eyeshadow palette. I was like, I might as well just use that. So a lot of the shimmers and a lot of the mattes that were in there, I felt I already owned in other places. So in the end, I decided not to get it because it would be quite expensive to have it shipped over and all that. And I just felt it wasn't going to be worth it for me. So that's why I never really got that one. Another limited edition eyeshadow palette that I could have gotten my hands on is the Tarte Make Believe in Your Selfie, or Make Believe in Yourself. I never know what it's called. And everybody was like raving about it. It was an all shimmer palette. And I saw this at Ulta when I was in the US. I was there for a work trip, and me and a colleague went on a work trip to visit placement students in Orlando. And we went to, like, I was like, I do want to go to an Ulta. He had some stores he wanted to go to. So he drove me to Ulta, and I went to Ulta, and they had this palette, and I was like looking at it and going like, why would I get it? So everybody was raving about how good it was because it had all those really lovely shimmers, but to me they just looked very muted and a bit bland, and then you got this highlighter in the middle. So I didn't really get it. I just didn't really get the concept behind it. I think it had one matte, which was a bit of a crease shade kind of thing. And I was like, I would never use the highlight. That crease shade didn't really go with enough of the other shades in there. And the shimmers looked very muted and more like it wasn't as if you got like tons of different textures. It was more like every texture and every single one of the shimmers was the same. So that to me just felt very limiting. So that's why I never picked up the Tarte Make Believe It Yourself. Another palette that I spotted on that trip was the Too Faced Natural Love palette. And then later, of course, they also did the Natural Lust. And a lot of people were actually raving, especially about that Natural Love palette. A lot of people were raving about it. But for both of these, I just felt that they were too big and bulky for my makeup tastes. You know about me that I don't really like very large eyeshadow palettes. And especially the Natural Love, like the Natural Lust, has a bit of variety. It has a teal. It has that peacock on the front, so it has a couple of those like peacock kind of shades. That definitely sort of like had me eyeball that palette for like a hot minute, but then I very quickly realized that as with the Natural Love, the Natural Lust just had too many repeat shades, which is why I don't like very large palettes. That's why I don't like Morphe stuff either, because you just get so many shades that translate similarly on the eye. And I'm pretty sure that if I were to put all of my neutral eyeshadow palettes together, I have a lot of repeat shades already in all of these different palettes. So really no need to add a single palette that does exactly that. Right? Then another Urban Decay palette that's quite recent that I passed up on, and that's the Urban Decay Game of Thrones limited edition. I actually spotted this in store before it was released. I went to the store, I'm not sure, to pick up something else, and then the makeup artist was like, oh, you like Urban Decay? Well, you know, this new palette is coming out on Thursday, we already have it. And she showed me the palette, and I was allowed to swatch it already and all that, like 3 days before anybody else was able to look at it. So it was super nice. And I was looking at it and I was like, there's one shade in the palette I like, and the rest I own by Urban Decay, because again, Urban Decay seems to be repackaging or redoing new versions of older palettes. So for instance, the Wired palette is like this new electric palette, and of course they discontinued the Naked, so now they have the Naked Reloaded, which I think was already discontinued as well. You can no longer get that even. And now they are like with the Game of Thrones, I felt it was very much like a lot of shades similar to either their Spectrum palettes that they did in the past, which again, I own one of those, or the Alice in Wonderland collections that they've done, the Book of Shadows that they used to do. I don't own any of those, and also the Vice palette. So I just feel that Urban Decay just really needs to come up with something new and fresh for a change. There was only one shade in that Game of Thrones palette that appealed to me, which was Winterfell, which was really stunning, like it had a really, really interesting shimmer to it, I remember. But I was like, I don't need that shade. Like, I have these Cleona, wait, I'm sitting here next to other palettes, because I knew I was going to get myself some Cleona last year before that palette came out. I already knew that I was going to get some of these multi-chromes. Ooh, I'm sticking my finger in. So those are 10 times more interesting than that shimmer in the Game of Thrones palette. Then another Urban Decay palette I passed up on is the Gwen Stefani palette. This was tough though. This was really, really tough. I almost bought it. The Gwen Stefani palette by Urban Decay, I had it in my hands to go and purchase it. And then I put it back. And I ended up never getting it again. And the main reason is, again, like with the Kat Von D and also the Natural Love palette by Too Faced, it just had so many shades that looked the same. So I think it had like 8 shades in like the top and the middle row that were like these basic matte neutrals. And I was like, they just all looked the same. And then you got like a really nice like shimmering blue. That was drawing my eyes like into this palette, but I was like, I don't need this. I already own Naked palettes by Urban Decay. I'm not a huge fan of mattes. I prefer shimmers over mattes. So I was like, I'm never going to use this. So this is again another limited edition palette that I could have purchased, but that I decided not to put my money towards. And another Kat Von D item on this list is the Saint and Sinner. And the Saint and Sinner, it has its fan base. And I just don't get it. I was like super excited because I passed on, I think the Metal Matte came the year before the Saint and Sinner. So I was like, yep, I'm going to get myself a holiday release Kat Von D this year. And then the pictures came out and the packaging was stunning. And of course, first you get to see the packaging. So I was all stoked and like, ooh, I'm going to get this palette. And then they opened the inside and I was like, what looks am I going to do with this? I did not get the color story. I thought it was very haphazard. I thought the idea behind it of stained glass windows was so cool. But then again, when I really, like, I think, was it Georgia Harris who put hers in, like, on, like, a gradient? Like, people started to rearrange the palette because it was so, like, such a mind-boggling, weird palette to work with otherwise for them. So, and then, again, you got a lot of, like, neutrals, and you just had a couple of pops that really stood out because of how the palette had been arranged originally. So that's why I was like, no, I really don't need that. So this was just one of those palettes where I was super stoked, like knowing it was coming, going like, oh yeah, I would like to have that, just based on packaging and, you know, it being Kat Von D at the time. But then I saw the inside and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Jeffree Star, Shane Dawson, shall we mention that for a minute? That conspiracy palette. Of course I watched the series just like everybody else on YouTube. And I was like, yeah, if this is going to be a fun palette, I might pick it up. And then I saw the color story of the large and the mini conspiracy palette. And I was like, "Keh? Like, what am I going to do with that?" Like, that conspiracy palette, there's a few shades in it that look really stunning. I think it's like sleep paralysis, and there's this like really dark shimmering green. Those look stunning. And I think you can work with it. I think it can make for really stunning looks. But there's also just so many boring shades in it, which I actually think is something that Jeffree Star does quite a lot. And then the mini conspiracy had two blues that were almost identical, and still everybody bought it. And I was like, why? I didn't get it at all. Like, now that the mini conspiracy is going to come with this green shade, it's a bit more appealing to me, but no. If a color story doesn't make a lot of sense to me, if I can't see myself using it, I'm just not even gonna bother, no matter how popular a product is. So another thing I want to mention in this video is the limited edition Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadow palettes. She's been coming out with these like longer rectangular, and then you get like four trios, I think you get. And I love Charlotte Tilbury like eyeshadow quality. I really like them, her little quads. I've got two of them. They make for such easy basic looks, and I really like reaching for mine around the holidays to have that extra luxury sort of like bougie feeling. I really like it. And some people who I follow on YouTube have mentioned that they were very much lusting after these palettes. She now also does a Pillow Talk version, I think, but she's done like, I think she's done one for like the past 3 years as limited edition for Christmas. And I look at them and they're like 75 euros, maybe 80. And I'm like, for what you get, like how much product you get versus the shades you get, it's just, it's a snooze fest. I mean, I get the aesthetic of Charlotte Tilbury as a brand, and I love that. It's sort of like that easy, sort of like everything goes together kind of look. I think it's stunning. I think it's stunning what she does with her brand, and that everything is very consistent, and the quality of her products are amazing. But in terms of what I already have in my makeup collection, especially when it comes to eyeshadow, those kind of palettes are just super duper boring to me. I did buy the Pillow Talk blush, but that Pillow Talk eyeshadow palette, I know I don't have to own because I have those kind of shades a million times over. And it's just, it doesn't feel very new and hip and happening. So for me, no, going to pass up on that. And then number 9 is the Lorac Mega Pros. I think if there's a limited edition eyeshadow palette that everybody wanted to have, were the Lorac Mega Pros when they were doing them limited edition for Christmas. That first one sort of like broke the internet, and then they brought it back and now it's permanent or something like that. The 2 I think you can no longer get, but the 3 and the 4 seem to be like popping up every once in a while. Lorac for me personally is super hard to get. So that's why I never really chased it down. The Lorac products I currently own, I've all bought in store during different like trips I took. Maybe Nordstrom started shipping to Europe at some point, so I may have bought the Lorac Pro 1 via Nordstrom at some point. But the mega palettes just never really came to an online store that I had access to. The only way I could have purchased them is through things like eBay, and people were like asking tons of money for it. So I just, you know, sometimes I really pass up on products, like whether they are limited edition or not, just because they are going to be so hard to get or super expensive to have them shipped or whatever. I guess it's why I have no Gimme Glow yet. I really want to try Gimme Glow as a brand, but they charge $35 for shipping. I'm not gonna do it. I'm sorry. I don't care how good your formula is, but I'm not gonna pay $35 for shipping. It's because I would also have to pay a customs fee on top of that. That would make the palette 3 times more expensive than what you can get it for in the US. And also with these Lorac Mega Pro palettes, like that Pro 4 palette has my name written all over it. I'd like to get it at some point, but please make sure I can get it in a way that doesn't have me shell out 150 euros for a single palette that retails for like 40, you know? Maybe they were a bit more expensive, more like 55 or something like that. But yeah, I'm not going to pay triple for a palette, you know? I'm not. And last but not least, the final 2 palettes I want to mention here are some limited edition ABH palettes. The Jackie Aina I started to hunt down after seeing it in everybody's like favorites of 2019 videos. I actually saw that palette when I was in New York last fall, and I didn't buy it. And I was like, don't need it, don't need it. And then everybody's raving about it, and then people were still doing looks with it around Christmas time on their pale faces, and I was like, oh, wait, you can make it work if you have a lighter skin tone. So I decided to buy that. But another palette that was out at the time was the Carly Bible palette. So I spotted that too in real life, and I really like the top row of that eyeshadow palette with the cool tones and the periwinkles. Stunning. What I don't get is why there should be those super warm, like reddish, orangey shades at the bottom. Like that for me just kills the palette. It just, give me a navy blue instead of a red. Like I really don't get it. So that palette I definitely passed up on. If it goes on like super sale at some point and I can get it for like 15 euros, then I might still pick it up because I do really like the ABH formula. And that top row of shades I think can be very, very nice to complement the Norvina, but no point. And of course the Amrezy palette as well. Pressed glitters, y'all. Plus, if you already own ABH, if you put the Soft Glam, the Norvina, and the Riviera into one palette, you get the Amrezy. Just look at the shades that are in there. If you fuse those 3 palettes together, you have exactly that palette. So for me, it just wasn't unique enough. I really like that sparkly packaging that it comes in. It looks stunning. It's a bit big. I think that Anastasia should stay with like the same, like, is it 14 shades? Like classic, like style packaging. Right now it's a bit bigger. I don't necessarily always think that bigger eyeshadow palettes are necessarily better because you get a lot of repeat shades. And I think that if you compare that Amrezy palette to other palettes already in Anastasia's line, it's not that unique. It's just, it's not that fantastic. So those are some of my thoughts on some older and more recent limited edition eyeshadow palettes and why I personally didn't get them. Maybe it's one of your favorite palettes. That could of course be the case. So I didn't try to roast your favorite palette. I do apologize if that's the way you interpreted it. But yeah, you do you like what you like. These were palettes I decided not to get because they just didn't really make a lot of sense to me. That's all I can say. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 3 new videos a week on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I hope you stay safe and stay healthy, especially, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!